So the promise of a smarter life seems so obvious. Install a smart thermostat, connect a few voice assistants, let your fridge reorder the milk.
Alexa, master on.
The fantasy was frictionless living, where every task, every appliance, every behavior could be optimized, ideally without you having to think about it.
Here, everything is connected, and it's supposed to make our lives easier, from interactive smart mirrors to an intelligent coffee machine.
And for a while, that fantasy sold really well. From 2016 to 2024, the smart home industry expanded at a staggering pace, growing from a $24 billion market to over $160 billion globally.
This must be the new fridge.
You like this?
In the US alone, over 60 million households now own at least one smart home device. That's nearly half the country. And these aren't just high-tech gadgets anymore, they've become default settings.
Compatible lights, TV, radio can all be operated by voice, and it'll even help plan your day.
Builders now routinely install Wi-Fi-enabled doorbells, light systems, ovens, thermostats, and even toilets as standard features in new construction homes. But as adoption accelerated, so did dependence. And the consequence of that dependence isn't just about software glitches or forgotten passwords. It's about what happens when the infrastructure of daily life becomes so deeply tied to companies, systems, and algorithms that you neither control nor fully understand.
The technology that powers your home's smart devices also listens, collects, and stores all the information you give it.
The early 2020s represented a pivotal shift, not only in what people owned, but how they lived. Increasingly, the smallest tasks, turning off a light,
Hey Google, turn off all the lights.
locking a door, adjusting the temperature,
Alexa, set living room to 74 degrees.
The heat's set to 74.
were no longer actions, but commands. And commands required connection. Connection required subscriptions. Subscriptions required data. And that data, terabytes of it, had a market value. Between 2021 and 2025, the largest tech firms, Amazon, Google, Apple, and Samsung, consolidated control over more than 80% of the smart home ecosystem.
Statista shows Amazon echoes as the dominant player with 65% of the market.
These weren't just hardware providers. They were data firms, surveillance platforms, and ad networks, disguised in brushed aluminum and matte black casings. And while consumers thought they were buying convenience, they were entering contracts. Because every device added to the home didn't just automate a function, it initiated a relationship. One that would require ongoing updates, cloud storage, app permissions, and access to location, behavioral trends, and household routines. And those requirements weren't static. In 2025, more than 60% of smart home products on the market operate on a subscription model, a figure up from just 18% in 2018.
$199 will set you on a path to home automation.
That means the features once sold as part of the device itself now exist behind monthly fees. Want to record your doorbell footage? $3. Want to access your vacuum's cleaning history? That's another $5. Need your AI assistant to remember your preferences across devices? $10 and a linked account. What emerged wasn't a smart home, it was a microeconomy. One where your toaster could require a firmware update and your garage door might refuse to close unless your subscription is active. This shift was not accidental. It mirrored a broader transformation across the tech landscape, where products are no longer sold for their functionality, but for their potential to become recurring revenue streams. This is the SaaSification of daily life, where smart no longer refers to intelligence, but to business models. And homes, our most personal grounded spaces, became the latest frontier. By 2025, over 78% of all new appliances being sold in the US come with some form of connectivity.
Here we have the washing machine. It's actually super smart.
Even stoves, once the most analog device in a kitchen, now arrive with Wi-Fi chips, cloud syncing, and app-based recipes. In most cases, these smart features are required to access the full capabilities of the appliance. But when manufacturers control the update servers, they also control the lifespan. According to the US PIRG Education Fund, planned obsolescence in smart appliances has quietly reduced the functional lifespan of household devices by 25 to 40%. Not because the hardware fails, but because the company stopped supporting the software. What used to last 15 years, like a washing machine or fridge, now comes with support cycles shorter than your smartphone. And with repair limitations, locked firmware, and proprietary screws, it's often cheaper to replace than repair. This isn't just inconvenient, it's structurally expensive.
What happens when the software and apps behind your so-called smart tech stops working?
In 2024 alone, American households spent over $1.4 billion replacing appliances that were otherwise mechanically functional but digitally obsolete. That figure doesn't account for the cumulative cost of subscriptions, replacement parts, or increased energy consumption caused by background connectivity. And it's not just the hardware that's changing, it's the mental architecture. Smart tech promised to give users control, but in reality, it reshaped expectations, behavior, and tolerances. The more people integrated automation into their routines, the more dependent they became on its presence, even when it malfunctioned.
From a nearby cafe, he's able to control his home's connected devices from his phone.
In one Yale study from early 2025, over 60% of smart home users admitted they were uncertain how their devices worked. Yet, 80% said they couldn't imagine going back to a non-smart alternative. This is what behavioral economists refer to as learned helplessness at scale, when convenience is optimized to the point where autonomy feels inefficient.
Phone alarm is about to go off. So a few minutes before the alarm turns on, an automation is triggered to open up the shades slightly. This will knock me out of hypersleep so I don't completely sleep through my alarm.
And when autonomy feels inefficient, you stop noticing what you've lost. Like the ability to function when Wi-Fi is down, like the right to repair, like privacy. Privacy, once a fundamental principle of home life, has now been transformed into a settings menu. One filled with toggle switches, buried disclosures, and updates you must accept in order to continue using what you already paid for. And the irony is, this erosion isn't happening through malice. It's happening through design. Because the most powerful innovations of the last decade weren't hardware breakthroughs, they were software interfaces that changed how we behave. And no interface has done that more rapidly than AI.
Google added AI capabilities to its assistant, allowing its home devices to do things like respond in natural language.
In 2025, artificial intelligence, especially tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude, have automated everything from email writing and shopping lists to home scheduling.
You're running low on beer.
You.
Whoops, did you forget to scan that barcode?
Parental controls, and full household management. Smart assistants, once limited to what's the weather and play jazz, now control everything from the thermostat to your child's tutoring schedule. They don't just answer questions, they generate routines, they manage tasks, they become the first layer of decision-making. But the trade-off is opacity. Because what you gain in automation, you lose in explanation. A child's bedtime routine might shift by 30 minutes because the assistant analyzed recent sleep data. Groceries may auto-order based on predicted need instead of actual inventory.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see any wheat thins. Shall I add them to your shopping list?
Sure.
Your thermostat might prioritize energy efficiency over personal comfort because the algorithm determined it was better for your budget. And over time, you begin to accept the results without understanding the process. That acceptance becomes a new baseline, one where manual override feels archaic.
Thing that you can automate, you've automated.
Everything that I can automate.
And where the company setting the defaults has more control over your daily rhythm than you do. This shift is particularly evident in how people now describe their problems. It's no longer, I forgot to lock the door. It's, my app didn't notify me. Agency is outsourced, accountability is fragmented, and in a world where every object has a login and every function has a dashboard, the role of the human shifts from actor to monitor. You're no longer doing things, you're managing the doing of things. But this isn't efficiency, it's performance. And performance at scale comes with cost. As more devices integrate, more systems sync, and more behaviors are tracked, the infrastructure to support it all becomes increasingly fragile. When every appliance relies on the cloud, a single outage doesn't just cause inconvenience, it halts function. In January 2025, a 45-minute outage on Amazon Web Services affected over 30% of smart home devices in the US.
Users were tweeting they were locked out of their homes or their cameras weren't working, and their alarms couldn't be shut off.
Consumers reported being locked out of their homes, unable to adjust thermostats during a winter storm, and completely frozen out of basic functions like turning on lights or operating garage doors. These aren't theoretical risks. They're engineering dependencies. And as these dependencies compound, they begin to reshape not just how homes operate, but how economies function. Smart home tech was supposed to decentralize comfort, but in practice it has centralized control in the hands of a few large companies who maintain the servers, write the updates, and own the protocols. And for many households, that control comes at a cost: financial, psychological, and structural. Financially, the combined burden of upfront hardware, ongoing subscriptions, replacement cycles, and increased energy usage has transformed the home into a captive revenue stream. Psychologically, the always-on nature of smart environments has introduced new forms of anxiety, ambient surveillance, data insecurity, and tech fatigue. Structurally, entire industries now depend on software platforms that can change overnight, with no recourse for consumers. And perhaps the most overlooked consequence? It's made failure invisible. When a light doesn't turn on, we reboot the app. When the vacuum doesn't clean, we delete and reinstall. When the fridge makes noise, we assume it needs an update. We rarely ask, should any of this be necessary? The normalization of digital dysfunction has created a generation of users who tolerate instability as the cost of innovation. But innovation, when unexamined, becomes inertia. And inertia, especially in tech, doesn't drift toward simplicity. It drifts toward complexity, dependence, and profit maximization. In the same way the financialization of housing turned shelter into an asset class, the smartification of homes has turned comfort into a subscription tier. And while this may seem like a personal inconvenience, the implications are societal. Because when essential functions, security, lighting, climate, food, are tied to software controlled by private firms, the line between utility and service begins to blur. And when that blur becomes normalized, policy often lags behind. As of mid-2025, there is still no comprehensive regulation on smart home data usage, product longevity, or right to repair in the United States. Consumers rely on terms of service contracts that are rarely read and even more rarely enforced. So, what began as a convenience has evolved into a system. And that system, once embedded, is hard to reverse. Because opting out isn't just about unplugging devices, but more about rewiring behavior. And behavior, once trained by convenience, resists change. Which brings us here, to a moment when the average household owns 17 connected devices, spends $732 a year in related services, and still doesn't feel in control. In actuality, the real cost of smart tech isn't just the money. It's the erosion of intuition, the outsourcing of basic decisions, the transformation of homes into interfaces, and the redefinition of autonomy as a compatibility issue. So the question isn't whether smart tech is good or bad, it's whether it's sustainable. Because systems that require infinite updates to function are not resilient. They're fragile by design. So maybe the smartest home is the one that still works when the Wi-Fi goes out. Maybe the best automation is the one you can walk away from. And maybe the real upgrade is realizing that smart isn't always an improvement. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown useful, share it with someone who's ever had to reboot their toaster. And keep learning about tech, about money, and about how the systems we rely on actually work. Because it's not just about knowing what to buy. It's about understanding why it was built that way in the first place. See you in the next one.